Once upon a time, there was a girl named Alina. She was almost 16. She was a princess who lived in the castle in the English kingdom. She loved being a princess, even though she had many responsibilities. There were some things she really hated about being a princess, though, one of them being the suffocating feeling of the castle walls. Every day, she would walk the suffocating feeling of the castle and doing her royal duties, not getting kidnapped by pirates. And on the rare occasion, she would be allowed to walk through the village. It was almost her coronation, so she walked around the village more often to make sure everything was in order. The castle walls started to feel even tighter, so she ended up spending even more time outside. The more time she spent outside, the deeper into the village she explored. She was having the time of her life. But one day, she realized she'd walked too far from the village and into greedy pirate territory. At first, she hadn't realized she'd crossed the border, but as she ventured further away from the castle, she saw less and less of her people. Even though Alina could no longer see the castle, she could no longer hear her beloved people, she continued on. She eventually came across a beach filled to the brim with explorers. Being dressed like a princess was not safe, so she tried to sneak around them, but one of the explorers saw her and shouted out, "That lady looks like a princess." Because of that, the crew of explorers took her onto the ship. It was a new ship. It had a curved hull and triangular sails. The princess had only ever seen square sails on her father's ship. As she was sitting in her cell, one of the explorers came over to her and started bragging about their new ship. They called it the Caravel. The men kept over-accentuating words. It was hard for Alina to understand, but it sounded Portuguese. Because of that, she traveled across the ocean with the explorer crew. While they attempted to contact her father through the newspapers in an attempt to gain glory and gold, since, they kidnapped a princess, they demanded the king's riches, but no word came. Eventually, she was let out of her cell so she could walk the deck. It was kind of boring. All the men would do was stare at pieces of paper they called maps and look at this circle they called a compass. Because of that, life was boring on the ship. Eventually, after many days of travel, they docked in this really hot place called Africa. Everyone there looked different to Alina. Their skin was much darker than hers. The men from the ship had all sorts of good with them, like rum and some textiles. They met different merchants who gave them weird plants and animals that were going to be used in cooking. It felt like the men traded forever, until finally the men were done. So they boarded the ship and took a bunch of those people with them. The people they took looked miserable, so Alina asked the men why they were being taken. The men said that they were different, so that meant they didn't have a choice. Once everyone was on board again, they set sail. They sailed for a long time and nothing really happened, until in the distance they saw the ship with a Jolly Roger flag on it. Someone saw it, and there was a moment of silence, then chaos. There were people shouting orders, and everyone was preparing for a battle. Alina ran and hid until the fight was over, and the explorers had won. Some of the pirates had a weird wooden leg. And ever since then, Alina has hated pirates. They couldn't stay in one place for long, so they kept sailing. When they got back to the place the explorers were from, Alina was taken in by one of the men. She went back to his plantation with the slaves he traded and stayed there.